The Arizona plains in 1875 stretched like a vast untamed wilderness of brittle grass and sun-bleached earth, a desolate expanse near Red Hollow where the dry wind kicked up dust clouds that stung the eyes and never ceased, its ceaseless murmur weaving tales of survival, loss, and resilience amid the prairie frontier. Red Hollow, a remote ranch perched on the edge of this harsh terrain, stood weathered under a dusty sky still clinging to the afternoon's heat, its adobe walls crumbling under years of neglect, its barren yard whispering of a solitude long abandoned. Jonah Reed rode slowly toward the property, his horse breathing heavily beneath him, each hoofstep leaving a faint imprint in the cracked earth. The weight of a long day's journey pressing on his 40-year-old frame, his face, rugged with a weathered brow and a dusting of gray at his temples, was framed by a battered hat, his shoulders bowed under the grief of burying his brother 2 years past in a shallow grave marked by a lone cactus. Since then, he had lived a wandering life, not by choice but necessity, carrying only a saddlebag with her memory, a faded photograph, a worn locket, the bedroll cold without her warmth. The townsfolk whispered of the quiet cowboy who drifted through, speaking only for work, some calling him hardened by loss, others saying he'd always been that way. He'd come to Red Hollow with $35, a sum scraped together from odd jobs and cattle drives, drawn by a land agent's promise of a cheap deal. A ranch sold at auction for unpaid taxes, its previous owner vanished without trace. His back ached with the ride, a persistent reminder of years in the saddle, and the solitude of the prairie had become a refuge from a world that had taken everything. As he dismounted near the sagging gate, the silence was broken by an eerie creak from the barn, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. He tethered his horse, his rifle in hand, and approached the ranch house, its door hanging ajar, the windows boarded with weathered planks. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the faint tang of decay, the furniture covered in cobwebs, the hearth cold and empty. Then he saw them 3 figures hanging from the rafters, their wrists bound with thick rope, their bodies swaying slightly in the draft. His breath caught, his heart pounding as he rushed forward, dropping his rifle to cut them down with his knife. They were young Apache girls, their deerskin dresses torn and stained, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. The eldest, Lila, perhaps in her late teens, steadied herself against the wall, her breathing ragged. The second, Mara, clutched her side where a bruise darkened her skin, her hands trembling. The youngest, Sienna, held a small child, Quay, no more than 2, whose whimpers filled the silence. Their wrists bore the raw marks of ropes, their bodies marked with signs of struggle, yet their spirits flickered with defiance. Elias's hands shook as he freed them, the ropes falling to the floor with a dull thud, the girls collapsing into his arms. "You're safe now," he muttered, his voice rough with shock and urgency. Lila met his gaze, her dark eyes searching, a faint nod acknowledging his words. He carried them to the cot in the corner, covering them with his coat and a tattered blanket, his mind racing with questions. How had they come to be here? Who had done this? The child, Quay, clung to Mara, his small face pressed against her chest, his breathing shallow but steady. Kneeling by the cold hearth, he struck a match, his hands still trembling, the flame catching slowly on the dry wood. Once it took, he stood and met their gazes. They watched him, silently, their eyes a mix of gratitude and wariness. "You're safe here," he said, his voice low and even. "I won't hurt you." Lila nodded faintly, and he pulled a chair to the far corner, sitting to guard them through the night, his jaw tight with the uncertainty of what he'd uncovered. He later learned their names through whispered exchanges: Lila, Mara, Sienna, each a survivor of a dark secret he was yet to unravel. By dawn, the fire crackled steadily, its orange glow brushing the cot where the girls and Quay lay, their breathing steadied, color returning to their faces. Elias hadn't slept, remaining in the chair, his damp shirt and aching back a testament to the night's shock. Quay stirred, his small hand reaching for Mara, who held him close. The girls rose slowly, their movements stiff from their ordeal, their eyes meeting his watchful, cautious, but not hostile. "You understand me?" he asked quietly. A pause, then a nod from Lila. "You hurt anywhere?" Another pause, and Mara touched her side, wincing, while Sienna gestured to a cut on her leg. Elias crouched beside them, rewrapping wounds with clean cloths, his hands gentle, their dignity unshaken despite their vulnerability. Names? He asked after a long moment. Lila introduced herself, and the others, Mara, Sienna, each nodding in turn, their accents hinting at Apache roots. He tapped his chest. Jonah. They surveyed the ranch adobe walls, sparse furniture, and the rifle near the door, their gazes lingering on it. Safe here, he said, following their looks. No one's coming. It was a hope, not a certainty, for girls like them, found hanging in a forsaken place, likely carrying a past that might follow. He stepped outside to tend his horse, needing space to process, the smoke rising steadily from the chimney, a sign of life within. Inside, the girls eased upright, their bodies aching from the ropes and hunger, the silence striking them as unfamiliar yet comforting. Jonah's coat smelled of leather and sage, and Mara pulled it closer, studying the chair where he'd watched over them and Quay. When Jonah returned with water and jerky, he found them sitting up, tending to each other, their torn dresses patched with makeshift cloth. He handed out the provisions, and they ate slowly, offering pieces to Quay, their eyes steady. "Where's your family?" he asked carefully. Lila looked away, her jaw tensing, shaking her head firmly. "Tribe?" Another pause, then, "Number." Her voice was clear, her accent strong, and though he sensed withheld truth, he let it rest. For the rest of the day, they communicated in glances and gestures, him clearing space by the fire, them organizing their meager belongings with quiet purpose. Jonah repaired the corral, his mind on the shocking discovery, while the girls kept the fire alive, claiming roles with silent strength. That night, they stayed near the hearth until he climbed into bed, then settled close, their warmth and Quay's soft breaths a new presence in his solitude. Neither spoke, but the silence had shifted, a bond forming in the wake of their shared resilience, the dark secret of the ranch lingering like a shadow. The Arizona plains unfurled like a relentless expanse of brittle grass and fading shadows as Jonah Reed, Lila, Mara, Sienna, Quay, and the Apache kin ventured away from Red Hollow, the pale dawn casting long, ghostly silhouettes across the prairie terrain. Jonah led the way on foot, his weathered coat dusted with prairie dust, his boots crunching through the dry earth, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a weathered brow, bore a mixture of determination and unease, his brown eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Lila, the eldest girl in her late teens, walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her wrists still raw from the ropes, her dark eyes sharp with survival. Mara and Sienna followed, their dresses patched and torn, their hands supporting Quay, the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery from the night's trauma. A young Apache warrior, Kono, trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 others from the girls' tribe, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The journey to a hidden tribal camp near Sunken Plains, a 2-day trek, was their goal. But the prairie held other trials to test their fragile alliance. Their water was scarce, the canteen they'd salvaged from Red Hollow reduced to a few tepid drops. Their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of dried berries Kono had foraged. The heat bit deep, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Quay, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Jonah's mind churned with the previous night's shocking discovery, the girls hanging in his newly bought ranch, the dark secret hinted at by their silence, the arrival of the Apache kin with their claim of sacred law, the threat of outlaws. He'd acted to ease his own guilt, but their presence now drew danger, a price he hadn't foreseen. He offered Lila water, a gesture of goodwill, his hand trembling slightly from the heat. Lila accepted, her eyes narrowing. "Why risk this for us?" she asked, her voice raw but steady. Jonah met her gaze, his brow furrowing. "Lost my brother to bandits. Can't leave you to die like that." Lila's expression softened, but suspicion lingered, a reflection of a life shaped by betrayal and survival. Kono and the warriors walked with a quiet dignity, their buckskin garments rustling softly, the woven pouch Mara carried catching the fading light. Kono shared their story as they moved, his voice low and resonant. Outlaws raided our village, stole our goods, hung them as bait. Lila, Mara, and Sienna fled with Quay to escape. We've tracked them since, fearing their return. Mara added, her tone firm. Our tribe cast us out. We ran to save our brother. A warrior, Nita muttered. They want our tribal secrets. Jonah's heart sank. The pouch likely held something valuable, a lure that had ruined men. But the girls' lives and Quay's safety were worth more. I'll keep you safe, he said, his resolve firming, though doubt gnawed at him about the pouch's contents. Their progress halted at midday when they reached a trading post tucked into a shallow gully. Prairie crossing, a haven for outlaws and wanderers. Jonah needed supplies, his stores depleted after the girls' rescue. But Lila tensed. Danger here, she warned. Men talk. Jonah nodded, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stifling, the stench of sweat and stale tobacco thick. A trader named Gideon Holt, a wiry man with a sly grin, leaned against a crate, his eyes narrowing. Jonah Reed, he said, heard you found 3 Apache girls in that cheap ranch. Outlaws are offering a bounty. Jonah's jaw tightened, his past with Prairie rumors flashing. Mind your own, Gideon. Holt smirked, his gaze on the pouch. $200 says I tell them where you're headed. Mara's pouch flashed, striking Holt's arm, forcing him back. Speak, and you bleed, she hissed. Jonah stepped forward, his rifle aimed. Walk away, Gideon, this ain't your fight. Holt paled, retreating, his laughter echoing. They'll hunt you down. Jonah cursed under his breath. Holt's treachery would lead the outlaws straight to sunken plains. We move now, he said. The tribe's respect grew, their trust a tentative thread. You're brave, Nita said. Jonah shook his head, the weight of his past pressing down. I've been a drifter. The ambush came at dusk. Hoofbeats thundered through the grass, and 4 outlaws led by a scar-faced rider named Vance surrounded them near a rocky outcrop. Hand over the girls, Reed. Vance barked, his rifle raised. Jonah fired, his shot grazing Vance's arm, sending him staggering. Lila threw a rock, striking another's shoulder, while Kono's spear felled a third. Jonah's second shot dropped a rider, the outcrop falling silent save for the wind's moan. The 4th fled, shouting threats. They'll burn you out. They took cover behind the rocks, bandaging minor cuts, the heat seeping into their exhaustion. Kono's eyes met Jonah's, easy, his suspicion easing. You fight for us, he said. Jonah wiped dust from his brow furrowing. Ain't right what they did. I've got regrets of my own. Sienna nodded, her pain surfacing. They killed our parents for this pouch. Jonah's breath caught. The relic was the key, a prize worth killing for. We'll keep it safe, he said, his resolve hardening. Their bond deepened as they rested, Jonah sharing his canteen, Kono offering berries from his pouch. What's in that pouch? He asked. Mara held it up, its symbols glowing faintly. It holds our sacred rights. They want them to sell. Jonah's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. I lost my brother to bandits, lived alone since. Mara's gaze softened. We're all broken then. Maybe we heal together. The night stretched ahead, the prairie vast, but the threat of the outlaws grew. Jonah taught Lila to use his lasso, her hands steady despite her past, their partnership a lifeline. Kono showed him Apache prairie signs, their trust aflame against the prairie's grip. You're strong, Jonah said. Lila smiled, a rare light in her eyes. You too, friend. The tribe watched, their kinship deepening. A family forged in the crucible of the prairie, but the peace was fleeting. Hoofbeats returned, closer now. Vance and his men, relentless as the heat. Jonah chose a defensible ridge, setting up with the tribe behind rocks. We fight if we must, he said, his rifle ready. Kono nodded, his spear poised. Vance's men appeared, their rifles glinting. Last chance, Reed, Vance shouted. Jonah fired, his shot dropping a rider, but an arrow grazed Kono's leg, drawing a cry. Mara shielded him, her pouch a talisman, while Nita's spear felled 2, forcing the attackers to retreat. They bandaged Kono's leg, Jonah's hands gentle. You're all my family now, he said. Nita's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. And you're ours. The prairie tested them, its dusty trials forging a bond. But the outlaws' wrath loomed larger, a storm they'd face together. Sunken Plains was near, but so was their reckoning. The Arizona plains stretched like an unforgiving ocean of brittle grass and rolling dunes, their surface baking under the relentless glare of a midday sun that churned the air into a shimmering haze of dust and heat, the horizon wavering with mirages of desperation. Jonah Reed, Lila, Mara, Sienna, Quay, and the Apache kin led by Kono pressed onward, the wagon creaking behind Jonah's steady hands, the weary horse plodding through the dry earth with a labored gait, its breath a faint gasp in the stifling air. Jonah's weathered coat clung to his broad frame with sweat, his boots sinking into the cracked soil, his lasso coiled at his hip, his rifle slung across his back. His face, rugged with a weathered brow, bore a determined set, his brown eyes scanning the horizon for signs of the outlaws, a quiet resolve battling the weight of his past solitude. Lila, the eldest girl in her late teens, walked beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her wrists still raw from the ropes, her dark eyes sharp with survival. Mara and Sienna followed, their dresses patched and torn, their hands supporting Quay, the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of recovery from the trauma. Kono trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his hands carrying a spear, his presence a silent guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their horses laden with supplies glinting in the weak light. The hidden tribal camp near Sunken Plains, their destination, was a day's journey, but the prairie held other trials to forge their resilience. Their water was nearly gone, the canteen they'd salvaged from Prairie Crossing reduced to a few tepid drops, their supplies dwindled to a strip of jerky and a handful of dried berries Kono had foraged. The heat beat down, its intensity a relentless adversary, the silence broken only by the rasp of their breathing, the soft whimper of Quay, and the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. Jonah's mind wrestled with his past, his brother lost to bandits, his years of wandering, a guilt that shadowed his every step. The presence of Lila, Mara, Sienna, and Quay, a mirror to his loneliness, stirred a compassion he'd buried, their resilience a challenge to his despair. "We need to find water soon," Jonah said, his voice hoarse from the dry air. Kono nodded, pointing to a faint depression on the prairie floor. "There's a dry wash ahead. It might hold a spring," he replied, his Apache wisdom guiding them through the wilderness. The tribe's silence, broken only by soft murmurs and the occasional rustle of supplies, hinted at their vigilance. The pouch Mara carried a burden they shared. They reached the dry wash as the sun peaked, its cracked earth a fleeting mercy against the scorching heat. Jonah checked the wagon, its wheels wobbling from the rough terrain, while Lila and a warrior named Nita scouted for signs of life, her movements aided by a makeshift crutch. The wash offered a shallow pool, its water brackish but drinkable, a rare oasis in the prairie's grip. Jonah filled the canteen, offering it to Nita first, his hands trembling from the heat. "Drink, friend," he said, the word warm with care. Nita accepted, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Jonah," she murmured, a rare nod breaking through her stoic demeanor. The moment was brief, but it deepened their bond, a thread of trust weaving through their shared struggle. The prairie's ordeal struck at noon. A dust storm brewed on the horizon, a roiling wall of red dust that swallowed the sky, its roar a test of their endurance. "Get down," Jonah shouted, pulling Lila, Quay, and the wagon behind a dune, the warriors and horse crowding in. The storm hit like a living entity, its force tearing at their clothes, dust clogging their throats and stinging their eyes. Jonah shielded Quay with his body, Lila and Mara huddling close, the tempest raging for hours, leaving them buried in drifts, their water spilled into the sand. As it passed, the prairie revealed a new peril, an outlaw trap, a snare concealed by dust, its metal jaws glinting near Lila's crutch. Jonah reacted instantly, yanking her back, the trap snapping shut inches from her. Kono's quick thinking with his spear dislodged the mechanism, saving them. "Good save," Jonah said, his respect for them growing. Lila nodded, her gaze steady. "The prairie tests our will," she replied. That night, they camped in the wash's lee, a small fire their only warmth, its glow casting shadows on the sandy walls. The storm had delayed them, the camp still a day away, and Jonah's mind churned with guilt. His brother's loss, his years of isolation, now this family's fight. Sienna offered him a berry, her hands gentle. "You fight for us," she said. "Why?" Jonah poked the fire, his face shadowed. I turned away from help once my brother paid for it. Can't do that again. Quay's eyes, though weak, softened, his small voice whispering, "Papa?" A word that pierced Jonah's heart. The confession hung heavy, a mirror to Jonah's regrets. "Strength ain't just in surviving," he said. "It's in standing together." Mara leaned against him, her voice small. "This pouch holds our rights. They want them to hide their crime." Jonah's heart ached, his losses echoing theirs. "I lost my brother to bandits. Lived alone since." Kono's gaze met his, a warmth breaking through. "We're all lost then. Maybe we find kin." Their talk was interrupted by a rustle. Apache figures emerged from the dusk, led by a stout woman with a painted face. "I am Tala, Kono's sister," she said, her voice cautious. "We saw the storm. Outlaws hunt you." She offered a water skin, her eyes on Lila, Mara, and Sienna. "You're alive, sisters. We thought you lost." Lila ran to her, tears in her eyes. "Jonah saved us." Tala nodded, offering Jonah a feathered cord. "You're kin now, Cowboy." The reunion was brief but heartfelt. Tala's warriors, 15 strong, joined them, their spears glinting. "The tracker, Vance, is near," Tala warned. "He plans an attack at dawn." Jonah's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield. "We'll be ready," he said. Quay's hand found his trust a beacon. "Father," he murmured. The word warmed Jonah, a redemption he hadn't sought. The peace shattered as the first light crept over the horizon. Hoofbeats echoed Vance and 12 riders, their rifles ready, their intent clear in the pre-dawn gloom. Tala's men melted into the sand dunes, leaving Jonah and the tribe exposed on the ridge. "Hold," Tala whispered, but Jonah stood firm, his rifle raised, the weight of the warning settling in. Vance's voice cut through the heat. "Give up the girls, Reed, or die," Jonah fired, his shot grazing a rider, but an arrow struck Tala's arm, drawing a cry. Mara shielded her, her pouch a talisman, while Kono's spear felled too, forcing Vance to retreat momentarily. They bandaged Tala's arm, Jonah's hands gentle. "You're all my family now," he said. Tala's eyes met his, a warmth breaking through. "And you're ours." The prairie tested them, its dusty trials forging a bond, but the outlaws' attack loomed larger, a storm they'd faced together. Sunken Plains was near, but so was their reckoning. Sunken Plains rose like a parched wound across the Arizona plains, its treacherous pass of cracked earth and weathered outcrops standing defiant against the encroaching dusk. The sun dipped low, casting a fiery glow across the plains' rim, the air thick with the scent of sun-scorched grass and the faint promise of a cooling night breeze following the day's relentless heat. Jonah Reed, Lila, Mara, Sienna, Quay, and the Apache kin led by Kono prepared for their stand, the tension palpable in the stillness, heightened by the looming threat of the outlaws' attack. Jonah's weathered coat was torn at the sleeve, his boots caked with dust and blood from his grazed arm, his lasso and rifle poised despite the ache in his muscles. His face, rugged with a weathered brow, bore a grim determination, his brown eyes, shadowed by the weight of his past solitude. Lila, the eldest girl in her late teens, stood beside him, her mended deerskin dress fluttering beneath a borrowed shawl, her arm wound bandaged, her dark eyes resolute with survival. Mara and Sienna flanked her, their dresses patched and torn, their hands supporting Quay, the 2-year-old boy, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face showing signs of courage. Kono trailed them, his buckskin attire adorned with faded beads, his leg wound bandaged, his hands wielding a spear, his presence a steady guardian, flanked by 3 Apache warriors, their faces painted with earth tones, their weapons and horses poised for battle. The journey to this refuge had forged their bond. Now tested by the outlaws' relentless pursuit, the plains offered strategic ground, steep dunes for ambushes, rocky outcrops for cover, and a narrow pass for traps. Jonah fortified a vantage point with Kono's men, his hands calloused from years of drifting, now skilled in war. Lila rigged tripwires with sinew, her movements precise despite her exhaustion, her pouch a constant reminder of their burden. The warriors assisted, stacking stones with Nita, their vigilance unwavering. "The outlaws want the pouch," Kono said, his voice low and strained. "They'll kill us for it." Jonah nodded, his guilt over past isolation fueling his resolve. "We hold them here," he replied. Nita handed him a sharpened stake, a silent pledge of unity, the weapon's weight a comfort in his hands. Tala distributed spears and arrows, her warriors blending into the plain's shadows, their movements silent and deadly. Vance leads them, she warned. The attack is imminent. Jonah's heart steadied, his bond with the tribe a shield against the encroaching dark. We fight as family, he said. Quay's small hand found his, a flicker of trust breaking through his fear. Father, he murmured, a word that warmed Jonah's soul. The sentiment lingered, a redemption he hadn't dared hope for. As the wind carried the distant sound of approaching hooves, the conflict, now a reality. As dusk deepened, the air grew taut with anticipation, the plain's silence broken by the crunch of boots on gravel. The outlaws rode in with 15 men, Vance at their side, the tracker's scar-faced grin a harbinger of violence. Their leader, a broad man in a black duster lined with stolen pelts, dismounted and called out, his voice a thunderclap against the plains. Reed, hand over the girls in that pouch or this plain becomes your grave. Jonah stepped forward, his rifle raised, his voice firm despite the heat. You'll have to take them over my dead body, he shouted, his breath visible in the cooling air. The clash erupted like a prairie storm. The outlaws charged, their rifles and revolvers spitting fire through the dusk. Jonah's first shot dropped a rider, the bullet finding its mark with a precision honed by survival. Kono's warriors struck from the shadows, their spears felling 2 more, their movements silent and deadly. Lila triggered a tripwire, a dynamite cache salvaged from an old trader's stash, exploding and sending a shower of dust and rock, scattering the attackers. But the outlaws' numbers were overwhelming, and Vance's rifle was a relentless predator, his bullet grazing Jonah's shoulder, drawing a sharp hiss of pain. Tala pulled him behind a dune, her arm wound, seeping anew. Stay alive, she growled, loosing an arrow that struck a man's chest, her aim unwavering despite her fatigue. The plains became a battlefield, its echoes ringing with gunfire and the thud of falling bodies. Jonah fired again, dropping another rider, the heat numbing his hands but not his resolve. Kono's warriors fought with primal fury, their spears piercing the fray, while Nita and the warriors lobbed rocks, their forms a surprising force against the rugged terrain. But the outlaw leader's voice cut through the chaos. Mara, give me the pouch's secret, or they all die. He held a pistol to Kono's head, the warrior's spear shattered, his eyes defiant. Mara's heart sank, her pouch clutched tight. No, she cried, her voice raw with emotion. Jonah's mind raced. He couldn't lose another family. He signaled Kono's men to hold, his gaze locking with Mara's. A silent plea for a plan. Mara stepped forward, her stance defiant despite her wounds. They betrayed our tribe, she shouted, her voice carrying over the wind. They massacred our family, hung us to cover their crime. The revelation hit Jonah like a thunderclap. The outlaws' greed wasn't just for the pouch, but to silence the girls who knew of the massacre, a dark secret her tribe had suffered. The leader laughed, his pistol steady. Then you all die with your defiance. But Mara moved, shoving Jonah, Leela, Sienna, Quay, and Rose aside as Vance fired, the bullet tearing through her chest. She fell, blood staining the dust, her pouch slipping from her grasp. Jonah, no, he roared, lunging to Mara's side, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wound. Kono's warriors charged, their spears a blur, felling 3 men in a surge of vengeance. Nita struck with a rock, stunning a rider, while Tala's arrow found another's leg. Jonah tackled Vance, their struggle a tangle of fists and sand, until his lasso coiled around the tracker's neck, ending the threat. The outlaw leader roared, charging with his pistol, but Kono's spear pierced his side, bringing him down. The remaining outlaws fled, their horses vanishing into the dusk. Jonah knelt beside Mara, his hands stained with her blood, his heart breaking as he tried to stem the flow. Hold on, he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes met his, a faint smile breaking through the pain. You're my brother now, she rasped. Protect them. The pouch is our truth. Her hand fell, her spirit slipping into the prairie's embrace, her sacrifice a final act of trust. Tala bound the leader, her men finishing the fight, the plains falling silent save for the wind's mournful wail. The outlaws were defeated, their men scattered, but Mara's loss was a wound deeper than the heat. Jonah cradled her, tears mixing with the dust on his face, the weight of her words sinking in. Quay, Lila, Sienna, Kono, and the warriors approached, placing the pouch, a woven mat, and herbs on her chest. "She was our sister," Quay said, his small voice thick. "Now she's with our ancestors." The Apache carried her to a pyre, their chants rising, a tribute to her courage that echoed through the plains. Jonah stood, his guilt eased by her forgiveness, his promise to protect Quay and the others a new purpose. The plains smoldered, the air heavy with loss and victory. Tala offered Jonah a place with the tribe, and he nodded. "I'll honor her at the camp," he said, his voice steady. The journey to Sunken Plains had broken the outlaw's grip, but Mara's sacrifice would resonate in the prairie's silence. Jonah's redemption was hers, and the pouch, her people's truth, would remain guarded. The dawn broke over Sunken Plains, a fragile light spilling across the windswept plains, where the embers of Mara's pyre glowed like the last whispers of a fading hope. The air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke and the dry, earthy aroma of the prairie. The vast Arizona landscape reclaiming the battlefield with a quiet, unyielding peace. Jonah Reed stood at the plain's edge, his weathered coat torn and dusted with ash, his boots planted firmly in the cracked earth, his lasso and rifle resting against a boulder. His face, rugged with a weathered brow, bore the weight of grief, his brown eyes glistening with unshed tears, the guilt of his past solitude softened by Mara's final words. The woven pouch with the tribal secrets, Mara's strange reward, hung around his neck on a cord, a symbol of the kinship that had brought him to this moment. The outlaw leader, bound and defeated, slumped against a rock, his claim to power shattered, his greed no match for the courage of a cowboy and his adopted tribe. Quay, the 2-year-old boy, clung to Jonah's leg, his tattered blanket pressed against his chest, his pale face reflecting a mix of sorrow and newfound strength. Lila, Sienna, Kono, Tala, Nita, and the Apache warriors gathered nearby, their painted faces mirroring the resilience of the prairie. The Apache warriors, led by Kono, moved with a solemn reverence, their faces reflecting the plains' rugged hues as they gathered around Mara's pyre. The flames had dwindled to a gentle glow, the earth around it darkened by melted wax and ash, a testament to her sacrifice. Kono knelt, offering a prayer in Apache, his voice a deep chant that reverberated through the plains, honoring a sister who had transcended her role as protector and mother. Jonah watched, his hands trembling as he placed Mara's shawl, once her shield, onto the pyre, a silent vow to carry her legacy forward. Quay, Lila, and the warriors joined him, adding the pouch, a woven mat, and a bundle of herbs, their offerings a tribute to her courage. "She saved us," Quay said, his small voice thick with emotion. "You kept her promise." Jonah nodded, the words a balm to his wounded soul, a redemption he hadn't dared to claim. The journey to the hidden tribal valley began, the warriors carrying the pyre's remnants through the plains' dusty trail, its ashes a sacred burden. The path was treacherous, the ground shifting underfoot, the heat of the day giving way to a cooling breeze that carried the promise of renewal. Jonah walked with them, his arm aching from the graze but his spirit lifted by their unity. The valley emerged a sheltered expanse nestled between rolling hills, its floor dotted with wildflowers and a faint shimmer of a spring fed by an underground stream. The Apache survivors greeted them, their faces etched with grief for Mara but warmth for her savior. Tala led Jonah to the spring, its waters clear and life-giving, reflecting the cavern walls adorned with painted symbols and woven mats, a sanctuary Mara had died to protect. "Her spirit guards this place," Tala said. "You are kin." The tribe gathered around a fire that night, the valley's walls amplifying their voices as they shared tales of Mara's bravery. Her gifts to Jonah, her trust, the pouch were now symbols of her legacy, their weight heavier than the sacred rites they held. They offered him a place among them, their eyes reflecting gratitude and hope. "You fought for her," Nita said, handing him a woven mat. "Stay and find peace." Jonah hesitated, his mind drifting to his past, a cowboy broken by bandits' loss, his brother's death a guilt he'd carried like a stone. Mara's words, "You're my brother," echoed, her sacrifice a key to unlock that prison. "I'll stay," he said finally, "but I'll bring my skills to your valley, with your help." The days that followed were a blend of mourning and rebuilding. The Apache taught Jonah their ways, how to channel the spring's water for crops, how to weave mats from prairie grasses, how to honor their rites with herbs by the fire. Quay became his shadow, the boy's small hands learning alongside Jonah's ADI, his laughter a rare sound that softened the edges of his grief. Lila, guided by Kono, took to organizing the valley's resources, her resilience turning into leadership, while Sienna tended the young ones, her gentle nature blossoming. They constructed a small adobe home near the spring, its walls rising under their hands, a fusion of Apache strength and Jonah's ranching skills. The prairie, once a place of solitude, became a bridge between worlds, its silence broken by the tribe's songs and the trickle of water, a stark contrast to the hollow quiet he'd known. One evening, as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple, Jonah stood at the spring's edge, the woven pouch a constant reminder. Quay and the tribal children joined him, holding a new pouch and a carved lasso crafted by the tribe. "For us?" Quay asked. Jonah nodded, his eyes misting as he handed them out. "Your sister would want you to have them," he said. Quay smiled, a rare light in his young face. "She gave us a home," the sentiment lingered, a bond forged in the crucible of the prairie, strengthened by the promise of a healed legacy. The tribe celebrated with a feast, their songs filling the valley, Mara's name woven into the melodies. Jonah learned her story in full, how she'd fled her tribe's exile to protect Quay, how she'd hidden the pouch to preserve the truth of their family's massacre, how her spirit now watched over them. His past, his failure to save his brother, his years of wandering faded against her forgiveness. He wasn't just a cowboy anymore, but a guardian, a father to those he'd once failed. Tala approached, offering a carved wooden flute. "Lead with her strength," she said. Jonah took it, his hand steady. "I will." Weeks later, the valley thrived, its spring nourishing new crops, its people strengthened by Jonah's aid. The tribe, true to their bond, began the journey back to Red Hollow, bringing materials and hands to rebuild Jonah's ranch, transforming the ruins into a symbol of renewal. He rebuilt his life, the tribe's help a lifeline, their stories a balm to his loneliness. Mara's shawl hung above the new home's door, a shrine to her sacrifice, its fabric a silent witness. The prairie stretched vast, its sun-scorched plains a testament to their fight, but it was no longer a place of solitude. Jonah's redemption was complete, not in land, but in the family he'd found: Quay, Lila, Sienna, Kono, Tala, Nita, the tribe, all bound by Mara's legacy. As the sun rose over sunken plains, its golden light bathed the valley and the distant silhouette of the reborn ranch, a promise of a new beginning. Jonah stood at the home's threshold, the wooden flute at his side, the woven pouch gleaming. He was no longer just a cowboy who'd bought a ranch for $35, but a father to a boy and brothers to sisters, whose sisters' courage had saved him, whose pouch had turned a dark secret into a legacy of hope. The prairie whispered her name, and Jonah carried it forward, a healed legacy born from the ashes of sacrifice, with the promise of a rebuilt home anchoring their new family.